Tony Angelo, let's start with an interesting anecdote.
This is kind of funny, and I just thought I should mention it because it kind of shows you we're all at different stages in life as we go. Last Thursday, very long story made very, very short. I had to call someone local to me for a haircut. My longtime barber, was not well. Very nice young man, did a wonderful job, and we were chatting. And as I was getting up from the chair, there were two pictures on the wall. They're like these retro pictures. One was Frank Sinatra, the other was James Dean. And he looked at me and he said, "Who's the guy on the right?" I said, "Well, that's James Dean." Said he's a very fine actor. And the other younger barber said, "Oh, yeah, he's great. He was in these movies and that sort of thing." And I said, Ronald Reagan, when he was acting, said James Dean was a wonderful actor, and Ronald Reagan loved him. And my barber, who could have been my son, for all I know, my grandson, looked at me and said, "You mean Ronald Reagan was an actor?" Lee Elci, you could have given me a shovel at that point and just tell me where to start digging, and I'll jump in. It's know your history, kids.
It's a brave new world, a new generation, my friend.
Man, the whole story of Ronald Reagan, I mean, like you never saw Newt Rockne All-American. Unbelievable. This has happened to me in the past. One day I went to a coffee shop, and I said to a very pretty young blonde lady, I said, "You remind me of a young Grace Kelly." She looked at me and said, "Who's Grace Kelly?" "Oh, please, you're killing me."
We're getting old, buddy.
But anyway, on to serious business, such as it is.
Let's start with housing.
Yeah, let's start with this. This is a place really, at least contemplated on this weekend, where I didn't think I wanted to go, but fortunately or unfortunately, I think it bears mention. There was an article in the Connecticut Mirror yesterday by a Roseanne Santos, who is an APRN, talking about the housing situation in Connecticut. And she was talking about going into horrible places and having to do, really distasteful tasks. And the problem is we're such a segregated society, and that's really the problem. And if we had better housing and better housing options, all of the problems would magically go away. And I'm reading this thing, and she's kind of hitting all the high notes as she's doing it. But they toss around a statistic that they don't support, and which makes me scratch my head in a state with dwindling population. There's 90,000 of adequate, affordable homes we don't have. And it's like, okay, but it leads you to a link, and they don't support it. But, I was standing in the shower last night, and I'm saying to myself, any single piece of, apartment house or whatever, at one point started off very new and over time became what it was. And I go back to my first father-in-law, who had a saying. He was like Washington Heights Irish in New York City, and he would say to me, "Slums don't make themselves, people make slums." So I guess in this whole thing of, work, live, ride, and all these, can one of these young people explain to me how, with all of the failures of the past, with Father Panic Village in Bridgeport and Southfield Village in Stamford, how building a house or will immediately make all these problems go away? I mean, there must be something wrong with me. And then not coming to an answer. The biggest thing, and you go back to these projects and you go back to, why they failed and why just building something, which of course is there's money involved, and that's why they want to do it. I mean, you could retrofit buildings, you could retrofit houses, you can make these things cooperative, you can give these people a share of ownership, you could drive up the marketability of these things. And I keep saying to people, why does Co-op City in New York succeed decade after decade and all the others? Easy. The government's out of it. Simple as that, and just as difficult. But the biggest thing, and why all of this stuff that we're hearing today about, affordable housing and, we have to do, why it is destined for even a bigger crash than all the other stuff is, Lee Elci, how are you going to keep the substances out? How are you going to keep the drugs out? I mean, I've had clients in the past. Now, this was not the generation that I had, but this was like later generations of the families. The families had become fanatically rich. Now, the people I had coming down weren't nearly as rich. They were kind of like the, the poor stepchildren. But how did the families get rich? Well, real simple. When they saw a project went up, they put a liquor store next to it. I mean, I'm telling you the way it is. And I mean, I don't see anything in this model that's nothing but failure. And the people that are doing it, I mean, not for nothing, they ain't the people that had better intentions years back. They don't have that kind of running gear. So I'm at a loss at this whole thing. Building housing in and of itself will not solve a God-blessed thing. You're ball, my friend.
What's the culprit? What's the major reason why we see this time and time and time and time again, Tony?
No sense of ownership. You've got to give them a sense of ownership. You've got to give them a sense of, this is mine, and if I do it, and if we keep our noses clean and we keep this thing straight, I can sell this for more money, or sell it to my child or something like that. I mean, these places that are quote unquote owner-driven cooperatives have waiting lists. I mean, people want to come in. I mean, it's like building a nicer house around someone, if they're not right in their heart and mind, it's just a question of giving them more time to do the same thing.
It always boils down to the same thing for me. It's personal accountability and responsibility. Either you have it or you don't.
Well, sure, but what you need. I'm not saying it's a perfect solution, but it's a much better solution if the owner-managers manage and have the rules to deal with that situation rather than the government that can't deal with anything. I mean, why did Father Panic Village? And this is a great thing. Go back, read in the 1940s about what they wanted to do, the church, the community, safe housing, and whatever. When push came to shove, they didn't know who was going to do what. Oh, that's the church's problem. Oh, that's the city's problem. You've got to give people the equity to do it themselves. This whole thing that's coming down here, which making things harder on private landlords. I mean, it's like not for nothing, but you need people with an economic investment in order to build the stupid thing. I mean, I'm not going to say it's a stupid thing, but what they're building is a stupid thing.
Tony, a lot of times there's a misconception that we're only talking about a certain group of people, but you can have huge pieces of land and live in a shack and it's run down and you don't take care of it. Again, it goes back to personal responsibility.
Well, yeah, certainly. And I mean, if you give the government the responsibility and say, tut, 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 I'll handle it, what do you think is going to happen? I mean, it's the same thing that's happened time and time again. It's not the structure of the building. They all, liberals want to get all hung up on, well, these aren't high rises. These are nice, affordable, kind of attractive housing, and that's going to make everything better. And you know what the biggest argument against all of that is Hunter Biden. Here's Hunter Biden, right? Right now, the kid's living in the White House, for crying out loud. The White House of the United States of America, or at least rumored to, but he's had everything that the kid's a wreck. And I mean, it's like, building a better house around Hunter Biden is not going to make him better, because it hasn't.
No, it certainly has not.
The government, this whole thing is the government's going to save us, and it's not.
All right, let's switch gears. Let's talk about one of my favorite topics, ethics or lack thereof in government.
Yeah. I was reading this week, and I think it's kind of like watching Beware of the Blob 2. There is a new 500,000 square foot medical and life sciences development being proposed in Branford on a farm. And it's the typical thing of, well, we will build it and they will come. And I looked at this and I said, I was chatting with some people, is this Semaphore the sequel? Because that was kind of the inauspicious beginnings of Semaphore. And it's been a while on this show. We've looked at ethics scandals. I mean, we learned just about everything we've done over 2.5, 3 years that anytime we did that, any ethics representation made by our governor, King Edward Lamont the Unaccountable, was a lie, a falsehood. There was no blind trust. 4CT was not really a charity. The Semaphore loan wasn't getting paid back. I mean, after, and it's just like, well, this is a horrific situation. So my thought is that anytime, and think about this. Just think about this for a moment, Lee Elci. All the time, all the money, all the printer's ink, all the effort, all the yelling and screaming and heavy breathing, what happened? So it's like, is there any corrective action coming out of our legislature to stop such a thing from ever happening again? Because it shouldn't. And interestingly enough, there's a bill in the legislature called number 1151, an act concerning revisions to the state code of ethics. So I looked at this on Sunday morning. I said, gee, this is hopeful. Maybe there's something constructive here happening. And I started to read down it and, chatted with some folks, read again, and I came to this definition of associated business, which is Ned skillfully used this in his sham ethics plan. Notice he hasn't talked about that, lately, ever since we splintered it. And as to, my wife Annie is not a holder of these businesses. She's associated with it, and therefore there ain't no issue. And that faked out everybody in the state except maybe you, me, and George Colley, and maybe one other. But the definition of what is an associated business for dealing with the state if you're an official is one where one is a director, officer, owner, limited or general partner, a beneficiary, or a direct holder of 5% or more of the corporate stock. Now, what I've just read, Annie Lamont was none of those things with Semaphore. She was a partner in an offshore partnership, or is a partner in an offshore partnership having the holding. So it's the same spongy rules. It's the same thing. And I'm just scratching my head, and I'm saying, the light never goes on, or so it seems. This was passed, from my understanding, unanimously, to be voted on. And it's like, don't you guys see, or do you care, or do you know, or have you not paid attention over, however many number of years for the same thing to happen again? I mean, we were talking also about the Retirement Security Authority, because there was another thing about, quasi-public organizations. And where if the Retirement Security Authority is not enumerated as a quasi-public organization, I mean, they're going to do the financial processing for that? I mean, I just don't understand it. Whenever there's a disaster, and we've all had disasters, and, in your business, your life, or something happens, and you're sitting there, any rational person thinks, I'm going to make this so we're never going to have to see this thing again. Connecticut just walks right into it, and it just amazes me. And I mean, if you really, really, really wanted to fix this thing and kill it dead, you'd add a couple of lines to those statutes where, nobody could benefit in any way, shape, or form, using some sort of a partnership or something to get at public business. That to me is just, I'm beside myself.
All right, Tony, take us home with the IRS whistleblower, some information there.
Oh, yeah, we're going to have to go quickly here. Now, I've been following this Hunter Biden thing, and just about every single corporate source of, be it Fox, be it CBS or whatever, is jumping to conclusions and misleading. And if you're Fox, you're putting out kind of false expectations. And I just want to tell people what this program is briefly and what it does. It's a program set up by the IRS. Basically, it's a think program where if you suspect somebody of fraud, you can fill out a form and you can put some stuff together and send it in. And if they do act on your information, you can collect as much as 30%. Now, nobody really knows how this organization works. They don't, or this division, they don't really disclose what they do. They normally give you two letters because I've represented whistleblowers. We acknowledge your claim, we reject your claim, basically is what it is. And where the mainstream organizations are saying, well, it's this brave IRS agent of his own will walked in one day and told his boss, I am going to whistleblow Hunter Biden, it doesn't work that way. Somebody sent the application in. This person, even though I believe they are of good intention, started to work on it and worked on the case, and then was roadblocked on the way up. And the question is, who roadblocked them? Maybe Janet Yellen roadblocked them. But basically, and this is the other thing, we are not even 100% positively sure. Go back and read the letter that they're talking about Hunter Biden and Merrick Garland, because these proceedings are entirely anonymous. Now, they probably are talking about them, but we're not really clear on that. But, so what this is basically is they're getting resistance at the top, but if you're watching Fox News, it's like, well, this thing's going to be all over, and, Hunter's going to really be in the soup. Well, he ain't going to really be in the soup quickly on a whistleblower thing, because there's like 4 or 5 levels of push me, pull you, going from Ways and Means to the Justice Department. Then Hunter has the option to provide a defense, and he probably will. On and on and on and on. So just to give you an indication of how long something like this will take, think of what happened with Trump. When Richie Neal started in 2017, we're going to pick at Trump. You and I, Lee Elci, were reading that congressional report when you subbed for Mike Gallagher at the end of 2022. We are in for a very long haul here, so don't think that this is going to be immediately over overnight. And this is not a guy in the government thinking, I am going to do this. This is just somebody who, in the government with a conscience, who was told by others, I don't know, maybe Bob Alinsky or somebody like that, you really got to take a look at this. What you do, it's awful and it's wretched.
Tony D'Angelo, follow him on Twitter, Tony D'Angelo 7. Thank you, sir.